All right, well, good evening, everybody. We're very thankful for your presence. We have another good crowd this evening. This is our third in our series of Nights of the Roundtable, our Summer of Restoration, and I think it's been a really good one. We've had some great topics and some great speakers to come and discuss these matters with us. We have with us tonight Brother Alan Myers. Alan is one of the shepherds at the North Heights. He's one of the shepherds at the Robinson and Center congregation in Conway, where Steve Norris is the preacher. I have known Alan for many years, going back to, what was your first year back at camp when the boys were older?
Would have been 98.
So I've known him a while, and I don't want to give you how many years that is. And he is currently the director of that week of camp that I've been going to since 2000. Became a Christian there, and I attribute basically every good spiritual thing that's ever happened to me to that week of camp. And Alan is the director of it. He is perfectly fitting for this discussion. When we were, Alex and I, hammering out who's going to speak on what topics, that was the first name that we thought of on a subject of family. Because he's not just a great shepherd, and he is a great shepherd. He is not just a good counselor and mentor and director of a camp for young people in general, but he is also the father of two tremendous Christian young men. And his wife Sharon couldn't be here, but together they have raised Jedediah and Noah, and as I say, they're exceptional. And so he is perfectly capable of discussing some of the things we're going to be talking about. The title of this discussion is Restoring Our Family. And as you know very well, we have a lot of family problems in our world today. Family, the idea of it's being redefined and broken down and dismantled by our culture. And so we're looking forward to picking Alan's brain, someone who's been a dad for quite a long time. How old are your boys?
21.
So 21 years the man's been a dad.
Twins.
Yes, they are. So we know he's going to do a great job. That's enough introduction. We're looking forward to diving in. Alex, why don't you take off?
Well, a lot of times people, here's what I know, that the family is under attack. I think Satan really gets a hold of us. And so a lot of times people ask me in marital counseling and that kind of thing, what does a good Christian marriage look like to your kids? What do my kids look for in a Christian marriage? What do you think, Alan?
The short answer is authenticity. The long answer for that is that they hear mom and dad talk about love your neighbor. They hear mom and dad talk about souls are lost. They hear mom and dad talk about forgiveness. But do they see mom and dad living that life out? And it's easy for anyone that you're around that much as a family is that you're going to notice things that don't fly, things that don't jive. And we have to be authentic for our kids. We want, obviously, you want to love each other, to love the Lord. So many times in marital counseling, premarital counseling, there's a lot of focus on the bride and the groom. And there's scripture that comes with that, of course, but there's, to me, not enough. More needs to be talked about with the relationship with God. And if we can get that down, then our relationship with one another tends to work better like that. I would say that as much as you can, the husbands and wives, so I'm especially talking, I guess, to younger parents right now, but as much as you can, show your kids that you love one another and that you're on the same page. Be involved in your church. Be involved in things as a family, doing things as if the boys are out of the house now. Well, almost. Not fast enough, but the boys are out of the house now, but all their growing up years, every Christmas, we would, as a family, make homemade sugar cookies, and then to the widows that we knew in Faulkner County, we would, through church or whatever, then we would take them some cookies for Santa, is what we called it. But and I made the boys wear Santa hats every time, and they hated that. Took pictures of it, they hated that. But just living for them what you're telling them that you should be doing.
It sounds like a lot of consistency. It's one thing to live one way or say to live one way and then live another way.
Right.
And one thing that I've seen where parents are very successful in is when they not just say this is the way it needs to be, or say that this is the way we love each other, but they demonstrate that love to each other is a huge impact on their kids.
Right. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, when it comes time that you have difficulty with one of your children, if you've lived the authentic life, the consistent life, then when you're bringing these things up, there's not a lot coming back on you. They're saying, but Dad, you don't. But Mommy, you don't.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You know, you've heard that saying, do as I say, not, or do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Well, that's a huge myth
Yeah.
to live by.
Yeah.
Really, we need to be consistent, and that's a
Yes.
good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think kids can pick up on hypocrisy that adults might try to blind themselves to. They don't realize how hypocritical they're being, but a kid has a sixth sense.
Yeah.
They can kind of see it, and it starts to ingrain in their minds as they develop, and they foster bitterness sometimes.
If you love your spouse, and you say you love your spouse, and your kids hear you say you love your spouse, but you don't ever show that you love your spouse, then you're not telling them the truth.
Right.
You're living a different way. Kira and I one thing we've always tried to do is to try to gross out our kids.
That's another point. Yeah.
I can say I love Kira, but when I kiss on her and when I hug on her and the kids go, ugh, well then we're doing our job.
That's right.
You know?
That's exactly right.
And
Yeah.
my kids say that all the time right now. It's
Yeah.
like,
If you're
"Oh,
not
it's so
embarrassing
gross."
your kids, you're not doing it right.
Right.
I had this lived out by my parents, and they had some friends that thank them now for teaching them this, that my parents were very affectionate towards one another, not overly, and I would encourage you, as comfortable as you are in front of your kids, and even sometimes a little bit in public, to be outwardly affectionate to one another. That does a lot for pushing away potential people that might want to make a move on your husband or your wife, but it also shows your kids, I mean, being a Christian husband and wife ought to be a joyful thing. And so I would, to the point of embarrassment, if your kids aren't grossed out, then you're not doing your job on that. So, but show them that you love one another.
So let's back up a few years in this scenario. Let's imagine a Christian couple who do not have kids yet, and you're counseling them. Maybe it's marital counseling or premarital counseling. That's the kind of thing they'll think about in the years to come, maybe. But what are some things that a new Christian couple should focus on before they have kids? You know, at the beginning of a family, before the kids come along.
Well, I hope, and we're going to make an assumption here by a Christian couple, that we've agreed on that we're together on Scripture, we're together on God. Those things. That's a big assumption I'm going to make right now. If we need to discuss that more, that's fine. But once we agree on that, I would say that discipline is a big thing. Discipline of your children, and we just had a quarter on parenting at RNC, and that was the best attended class I've ever taught. I think I'm sure it wasn't me, but it was a topic. But a lot of young parents don't have a mind to. And my wife's grandmother, she was a wise woman, and she told my wife, she said, "Get all your spankings in before they're through." And the majority of our spankings were in by. There were a few that we had to administer afterwards, and those were not fun. But agree on your discipline. Agree on the things that you're going to do like that, because they see a crack in the armor and they're going to exploit it. And I would say that, and back to the thing about being outwardly affectionate towards one another, decide on those kind of things. Decide on your finances. Finances can break up a home in a hurry. And so as a young couple, decide that we're going to live within our means, and if at all possible, I know it's not the thing to do now, that we believe that we have to have more or do more, whatever else, but if at all possible, somebody needs to stay home with the children. I believe that. I would have done more of it as our own. My wife, she was just able to have a job where her summers where she was home with the boys if they were off, she was off. And so as much as you can, and I would really suggest that if at all possible, one of you needs to stay home with the children. Time outweighs so much more. And also decide that you're going to work them. Now, my boys now will tell you that they will never want to see a blade of grass or a weed ever again in their lives. If they can move where it's just concrete, they will. But I believe it's helped them. I believe it's made them push themselves more than some of their peers. So I would say those are some of the things I would say to a young couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are big decisions. Like, I think most people think premarital counseling is deciding which side of the bed am I going to sleep on,
Yeah.
what color are we going to, paint the walls. But you're talking about things that could potentially end the engagement.
Yeah.
Or am I going to discipline my kids or not? Those things need to be decided before you say I do.
And that first thing that you mentioned about being consistent with, are we on the same page as far as our spiritual life? Are we on the same page in our relationship with God? That is a key thing. I always tell couples right now when they're first getting married, decide now that you're going to go to church every single time
Yes.
the day the doors are
Yes.
open. Don't let it be 40 years down the road where you say, you wake up on a Sunday morning or Sunday night or Wednesday night or whenever the church meets and say, well, should we go or not? Let that already be a decision that you made from the very beginning, that when the doors are open, when the elders have asked us to meet, we're going to be there. That way you don't have to make that decision later on. It's already been made.
Right.
And that's teaching kids without even teaching kids.
Yeah.
Without saying a
Right.
word. Yeah.
Are we on the next one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so let's ask this then. This is a good one here. Going back to raising kids and trying to do what's right. A lot of times parents have children that are ready to obey the gospel. Maybe they're heading in that direction. How do you encourage your child to obey the gospel when they're at that age, but not pushing them towards obeying the gospel?
Of course, every child's going to be different. It's going to be a different age for even, the children that you have in your own home. It's going to be different ages, different times. I'm going to go back to something I mentioned earlier, and it's the lifestyle that you as parents are showing them. I think that's the biggest way to encourage the child. And I've observed other families, but which is my boys, they came to us. We've always been involved in church, and I want to say that's something we should be, but they also need to see you. They need to see you with the people that you're neighbors with. They need to see you doing those things, teaching Christ to those people through your examples of the works that you do and the speech that you have. But I believe the biggest encouragement for your children is going to be the life that you live. And if they see the authenticity, if they see the consistency, if they see the joy that you have from being a Christian, when a hard time falls, what do you do? If I lose my job, what do my boys see me do? If we had a death and my mom passed away when the boys were freshmen in college, their first semester, and what do your children see you do in tough times like that? The way that you live your life is going to be the biggest encouragement to your kids. Now, just like in Deuteronomy where it talks about when you rise up, when you lie down, those things too, God is in everything. We're going to see him everywhere. And so we talk about him that way. We talk about him like he is everywhere because he is. And he's the giver of these good things that we have. So that would be my start anyway on that.
It's almost like you're saying, there's not going to be a time, okay, all of us who are parents of around teenagers, you have that talk. And we've all been teenagers, so we've had that talk. It's not like that. You're not having the talk Bible kind. It's more like you are living a right kind of life and you're setting that kind of example. And because they're your children and they do whatever you make them do, theoretically, they're going to be going along with that. They're going to be going when you go visit those people and you deliver those cookies. And so it's going to become a lifestyle. They're going to be living a Christian life before they become Christians.
Right.
So it's almost like the domino will fall by itself.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, there are conversations about
Sure,
it, for
right.
sure. But and some of those are going to be initiated by me, and some of those by the boys. But yeah, you're living a life that makes them desire it.
All right, let's flip the script on that. What if your child comes to you, and you know them better than they know themselves, of course, and they're not ready, but they've sat in the pews and they've heard the sermons, and someone else maybe got baptized that Sunday, and they say, Daddy, I want to get baptized. And I'm not talking a 5-year-old. Maybe it's 7, 8, 9, What do you say to that child?
Well, the first time the boys, and I guess it was Jed. I guess he was the first one. The first time Jed came, and we'll talk about this more in the other questions, but we don't have favorites. I'll just say that. But because my boys, if you knew them, they're so different, and it's hard to peg whose is who's being like. But Jed went to Sharon, and Mom, I want to be baptized. She said, okay, let's talk about it tomorrow. I'm glad you're thinking about that. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Well, several times he did that, and he never came back tomorrow. The desire, something, like I said, something had sparked him, and that sounded like a good idea right then, but he didn't come back tomorrow. And then whenever tomorrow came and he came back, then we started having conversations about those things. Then we started asking, do you know what this means? Do you know why we're doing these things? Of course, take them to Scripture, point these things out to them. But want to establish that there's a true desire, not just some event that's happened that sparked their curiosity, or I mean, it's, you know, it can be the church camp effect where, you know, one and then you have 6 more because they saw that first one. So.
And that the real question that we get a lot of times is what is that age of accountability? Where is that? You know, and of course it's not found in Scripture or anything like that.
It's a very blurry line.
It's a very blurry line of where kids are, and I think it's an individual thing. And I think what I hear you saying, and I've seen this as well, where when they're consistently coming to you and you can't just satisfy them with just a simple little answer of you're heading in the right direction, let's talk about that more. When they're consistently coming to you, that's when you have to take it very, very serious, because that's someone that is truly designed to become a Christian, not just someone who has sparked an interest in their mind and are wanting to do what God has said to do, which is good to do, but it's not just obeying God, it's a commitment, it's counting the cost of what it means to be a Christian.
When they won't take tomorrow for an answer.
Yeah. You want them to own it.
Yeah.
Because years down the road, sometime they're going to have a doubt. They may have a doubt, and you want them to be able to look back on that and say, no, I knew what I was doing. I owned that.
Yeah.
I was committed to that decision, and I believe I made the right decision.
Yeah.
Because you can get adults our age that will maybe have those doubts sometimes. They look back and think, well, maybe I didn't.
Yeah.
I spoke with someone just, I guess it was Tuesday night, that had the same exact conversation with him. It's a young man in his 20s, and he's looking back and wondering, I don't know if I did or not.
Yeah.
So you want them to own it. You want them to be their Christianity to be theirs. Not, I don't want Jez to be mine. I don't want Noah to be mine. I want it to be theirs.
Yeah.
Do you also think it's important to teach those parents it's okay to tell your child, hey, maybe not right now?
Oh, sure.
Because we drill so much into people when we give the invitation, hey, if you're not ready to be baptized tonight, you're not ready to be baptized, because it's a commitment. We talk about how you should not wait. If you're ready tonight, then let's do it tonight. Let's go right now. And then the other side of that is, well, now I'm sending my child away and they want to be, and they can kind of get nervous, and you wonder, well, what if they are ready and I'm pushing them away? I think it's important to tell those parents, it's all right. You know, those are kids, and you can kind of steer them. That's what parenting is.
Yes, it is okay. Is it okay to say no? Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
One thing that I've done with kids too, when they've said that they've wanted to obey the gospel, especially with young kids and even teenagers, and sometimes when kids or even adults are maybe immature, I'll have them write out a list of sins that they would be forgiven of, so that they would be able to document exactly what they're committing to and what they're giving up, you know. And I think that kind of helps, because they can take that list of sins, maybe they stick it in their Bible and keep it for 20 years, and when those doubts come, they look back and say, oh yeah, I remember when I wrote that, what I was being forgiven of, what I was committing to, and I don't have as much doubt anymore about what I've done.
And when the time, if they do go away and they weren't ready, and when the time comes they are ready, they'll remember that and they'll realize the difference. I wasn't ready then, but I know now.
Yeah.
I'm ready now.
We've had not baptism conversations, but even with Noah here lately about different things. And in the moment, he's like, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm a grown man. But then now even 6 months later, he'll come back and he'll say, yeah, Dad, I see what y'all were talking about. Y'all were right. I'm like, yeah, we know, but no, but it's a learning process, and you have to let them make those mistakes sometimes, and you have to let them learn so that, like I said, you know, it's going to be theirs. It's not no one else's.
Alan, I've had some people that will come and they'll say, I'm dating this fella, he's not a Christian, and I was, you know, maybe raised in the church, or some people that are Christians, and they're saying, well, I'm dating someone who's not, but I think that I can convert them. What kind of advice do you give to a young lady or a young man who wants to convert a non-Christian to Christianity through their relationship? That's a tough, loaded question.
Yeah, I admire that desire in someone. That anyone who cares enough about another soul to put themselves out there, and not even in a relationship like we're talking about here, but just to take those risks that you have to take to teach someone. Because there can be the rejection, there can be the hard feelings, there can be loss of a relationship there. I got advice from a college professor, and that's been lots of years ago, in the last century. He said, and he was mainly pointing to the ladies in our college class, but because for some reason at that time anyway, he felt like it was more the ladies who had that tendency to do that. But he said, convert them and wait a year. Before you do any kind of a move with them, convert them, wait a year, so that maybe that you find out that they were, because people sometimes, if they think they'll get in the door with you, then that they might do that, and you don't want that. You want that Christianity to be theirs. You want that to be on, to go back to that. So that little bit of advice, and also I would say it's tough to start a home, a divided household. So I admire them wanting to have a Christian spouse. I would advise the conversion, and then just maintain a relationship for a while and see where that goes. That's a difficult thing, and I know of some that have worked both ways. I've seen evidences of it both ways, but I would advise to study with them and convert them, and even have someone. Hopefully, there's a parent there involved somewhere, but someone involved that you're accountable to, that you can go back to and say, "Am I doing this right? Am I seeing this right?" Because sometimes we get too deep in the woods and we don't see what's going on around us. Yeah. So, but I would caution and take it slow before you make any kind of an eternal commitment, because baptism is an eternal commitment and marriage is an eternal commitment, and I hope you see it that way.
Yeah. You kind of touched on it just for a quick second, but it's a dangerous thing for someone to say, okay, well I'll get baptized so I can marry her. And then you don't even count the cost, as Jesus tells us to do, right, what you're getting yourself into. Because Jesus wants your life as much as your wife. He wants more. He wants your soul forever. So it's a serious thing. And yeah, I think that would be what you would counsel that young lady if it's the guy. I think you said the professor's advice was wait a year, convert them, and then wait to get married. Yeah, that'll probably do it.
And I mean, because you're going to see a lot of things in that year if you haven't already seen them. And maybe you'll see that they were true to what they did, and then maybe you won't. Yeah.
Just as an anecdote, I knew a lady who I worshiped with, preached to in Memphis, and she married a non-Christian, and she was a Christian and he was not, for years and for years. And for years she would every Sunday morning get up and she would pick out his Sunday clothes and lay them out on the bed for him to put on to go with her, and for years he would never do it. And for years, she would keep persistently getting out those clothes and putting them out. I'm going to church. You want to come? And he would never do it and never do it. But she kept living that life, and she kept being faithful, and she kept praying about it until finally, I think it was just on a random thing, he just got his clothes on, went with her, and he became a Christian. And so it can be done. That, however, is a 1 in a million scenario. There are just as many stories, unfortunately, about the person who marries him saying, well, I'm sure I'll convert him, and it never happens. And instead of being a buoy, it becomes an anchor, and it weighs you down. So it is a big commitment for both.
And the reason we want to talk about that is because the challenges that can come in a relationship in raising your children, in being a good husband or good father, or being a good wife or mother, if they're not on the same page, right, it just brings a lot of challenges. And at the same time, I know of couples who both are Christians and both, raised in good homes, and yet they also still struggle and have great challenges ahead of them as well. It's not like a cookie cutter scenario where once it's done exactly like this, it's perfect and there's no challenges or anything. It doesn't work like that.
Because people are different.
Yeah, people are different.
All right, Alan, let's get personal. But how personal is up to you, all right?
All right.
Now, if you know Alan Myers, he has lived a full life so far. How old are you, Alan? Let's go and get that on camera.
52.
52. Doesn't look a day over 51 and a half.
Closer to 53.
Lived a full life, and he will tell you about it. But we wrote this question before we had the speaker necessarily pegged down. The question is, if you could do it over again, what would you change as a teenager, as a 20-year-old, as a 30-year-old, even as a 40-year-old? What would you change in your life if you could get in that DeLorean and go back in time and tell yourself, no, don't? Did you have anything in mind?
Well, we could stay here all night.
Sure.
As a teenager in the 20s, that was a time of a lot of bad decisions in my life. That was a time of hiding a lot of things from my folks. And I'll share with you things. I mean, I've shared it with camp and everywhere else, but that was a time in my life when I was a thief. I was a drunk. I was not a good example. And now, Sundays and Wednesdays, I was a leader in my youth group, and we had a big youth group where I attended church. And then even up in my 20s through college, I attended a Christian college, and I got plugged into a congregation there, and I was teaching classes and involved in the worship services there Sundays and Wednesdays. And my life was different. Things I would change would be to pursue better relationships and to, well, the first relationship, pursue God more. That was just a way that was a means to an end with me at that time in my age of my life. The Christianity was. And I would pursue better relationships. That would be probably the biggest thing. Because even the guys that I lived next door to in junior high, I guess that's where it started, and I can't lay that on them. That was my choice. Those were my choices. But I would choose different friends and choose to pursue different things. And even with the good friends that I have, to take a more courageous stand on things when things started going a way that I knew they shouldn't. That covers my teenage years and half of my 20s. And then I got that key relationship. I met a young woman who told me, she said, if we're going to be together after this, you're going to have to stop doing all those things you're doing. She said, you're going to stop drinking, you're going to stop doing those other things, or we're not going to be together. And she meant enough to me that I decided to do that. And we don't all get that person in our lives. I hope you have someone in your life that'll get in your way like that and that says this is the way it's going to be, or that loves you enough and loves himself enough and loves God enough to say, I don't have to put up with this in my life, but I want you to be with God and be with me. So, 20s and 30s, I would say I would have done a lot more with my boys than I did. Especially dads, wrestle with your boys every chance you get. I would have done that a bunch more. There's, like I said, we could be here all night, but that's the biggest things would be my younger years. I look back on those with the regret, but also look back on those as with thankfulness, because I'm not there anymore. So.
That's great. Thank you.
You know, it's interesting because I think we could all look back at times where we'd say, well, I wish I would have done that a little bit different. And parents right now, when they're raising teenagers, it's a difficult time when they're going through that. And there's probably a lot of times in their lives where teenagers will look back and say, well, I wish I would have done things different. But I know that there's parents that say, boy, I wish I would have done that different. You know, what can a Christian parent or Christian couple do to help their teenager, maybe restore them back if they've fallen away? Because sometimes that's exactly what happens is teenagers fall away and teenagers go and do their own thing. What can I do as a parent when I'm struggling with my teenager to get them back on the right track?
I hope that you've established a foundation of love and trust with them. I appreciate what Matthew said about Noah and Jed, but they're their own boys. They're young men, and they make their own choices. So I think we can do everything that we can do, and they can still make the choices that we would rather they didn't make in their lives. To pursue things, to pursue people, jobs, whatever they are. But when they've made those choices and they've walked away, fallen away, however you want to put that, then I hope that you have the relationship and the foundation with them, and you have, it's an old term, but deposits in the bank with them, that when you come to them, and I hope as a parent that you will get in their way. I hope that you'll hug on them, that you'll love on them, tell them that they're wrong. And I hope that you'll hope that they know that through your relationship, through the things you've done, they've seen you make mistakes. And I hope that they've seen you own up to those mistakes that you made. I know of fathers who never made a mistake in their life. And I think that's a mistake as a father, as a parent. But I hope they've seen you make mistakes, and I hope that you've owned up to them. So that when you talk to them about theirs, then maybe you got a little credibility with them there. It's a difficult time because, especially if they're of any kind of an age at all, they're going to be defensive about it. They're going to have all kinds of reasons why they should have done what they've done. And there's going to have to be consistent love and consistent toughness. And sometimes those are the same things, sometimes they're not. But hold on to them and love them. Whenever we'd spank the boys, and Sharon would do it. There was no wait until Dad gets home, and she could deliver the blows. Trust me. But whenever I was around to do the corporal discipline, then I did it like my dad did, and I get right or wrong and different. And my dad used a leather belt on me, so turn me in, let me know so I can at least get home before the cops would after me. And then whenever I administered discipline, Sharon would, whichever boy it was, sometimes it was both of them, but Sharon would hold them until they quit crying. So I hope that you've established some kind of relationship like that with your kids, that they know the love is there, and they know that what you're doing comes from a position of love. And if you've done these things we've talked about before already, then you hopefully have some credibility with them, where they know the things that you're saying are true. These are wrong. You know these choices were wrong. You know this effect it's going to have on you and on your family, and it may take weeks and months. It may take years, but we've told our boys, and there's been things happening in our lives, and we've had to tell them, that no matter what, you can't outrun our love for you. You can't, because that's what we were shown from Christ. So, but that's a long answer to that, but that's a big one. There's almost same death. Nothing harder on a parent than, because that's a spiritual death. It can be to a mom and dad, and so it's a tough thing. So, but they've got to know that you love them, and then you've got to get in their way, and you got to stay in their way, but they've got to know you love them.
All right, let's lighten it just a little bit.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. I appreciate it. What Bible character do you think that you relate to, or that you perhaps would go to the most for an example for how to model stuff? And you can't use Jesus. That's cheating.
Oh man,
I know.
that's the one I had.
Yeah.
So I asked my wife this, and she didn't agree with me. So, and I said you probably use her answers because she usually knows better than I do on a lot of things.
Well, let's start there. What was her answer?
No,
I was going to say Samson. Is that what you judged?
Yeah, that's it. No, she really wouldn't give me an answer. But so I told her Gideon, and because if you think about the way that story starts, where Gideon is, he's in a wine press threshing out his wheat because he's scared that it's going to get stolen from him. And he's hiding out there, and what does the angel say to him when he approaches him?
What is it? Oh, go ahead.
No,
We don't remember. We didn't study it recently.
Oh, come on. Okay, well, all right. Huh? There you go.
We should have Mandy up here.
Okay,
Thank you,
and
Mandy.
he says this to a guy who is hiding in a wine press threshing out his wheat. And, you know, Gideon's like, you know, who else is here with me?
Yeah.
But God sees us as we can be, not as we are.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we're physical, we're human, so we're going to see, a lot of times we see people, some people can see the potential, the value in people. And God sees that in every one of us. And I love, because Gideon became what God told him he was. And God tells us we can be these things. We can be teachers. We can be prayer warriors. We can be servants of some kind. And we may not believe it, but we can be, because He's told us we can. And not one of my favorite verses, but if God says it, you can take it to the bank. So He's my favorite, and He becomes, you know, what are the 300 guys that are with him? What do they say whenever they break the jars? For the Lord and for Gideon, right? Yeah. So that's in a nutshell. But that's always been me, because that's been my tendency, is to try to be low key, and God says go do other things, and so I try to go do other things.
We'll edit out the part where the preachers didn't know what the verse said.
Right.
No one will ever know that was there.
So obviously Sharon helps you a lot in the different things that you do. How does she help you as a father, as a husband, an elder, and just overall as a Christian?
Wow. She loved that question when I read that to her, because I would not be, I already told you the first part of the story, the beginning of our story. But I would not be anywhere that I've been without her. She's you don't get to be a great man without a great wife. There's just too much that goes on. There's too much that happens in your life, the things you don't see. My uncle was a preacher out in West Texas for a lot of years, and his first wife, she died of cancer, but she would tell him, she'd say, "Now, John, I don't know so and so about that. I just don't have an easy feeling about this." And he would say, "The only time I've ever messed up in my life is when I didn't listen to her." When she would tell me these things, it wasn't all the time. She wasn't trying to channel the Holy Spirit, but whenever she would tell him things, if he would go with what she said, she was almost always right. And I've had that same thing with Sharon. She doesn't all the time.
Your wife is always right.
I will admit that in front of everybody. But whenever she's told me those things, and like I said, she doesn't force it all the time, but when she has, and I've gone against it, it's been a mistake. And I don't know, ladies, I'm grateful that you have that, because I'm grateful that Sharon has that, because I need it. She is loyal. She is consistent. She is, her drawing the line in the sand for me is just the beginning of lines that have been drawn in the sand in our marriage. Because she'll say, okay, last night, okay, this is just a very small, weak example, but I'll give it to you. So, worked outside all day except for the funeral, and been weed eating, and killing fire ants. There's like 40 nests all over my yard, mounds. And then she is mowed, and so it's my job to rake the grass. So, and she always puts it in little rows in the yard. She'll blow it all into one little row so I can just rake it. Travis has helped me rake it before. It is 7:30 or 8 at night, and it's almost dark outside, and I've come and sat down to get a drink, and I said, I'm just going to have to rake that some other time. And she says, and she's very kind. She says, if it stays out there like that, it's going to kill the grass where it's at. There's going to be a big dead spot all the way across the yard. Okay, so I get up, and you can tell the last pile I raked, because it was so dark, there's still some of it out there, but that's just going to have to kill the grass there. But I raked everything else. But she's a very much a do the job right the first time kind of person. There's probably a bunch of y'all out there. I'm not one of those people. Hey, can I cut that corner? But she has been my encourager to be better all my life. She has She has always pushed me to be more than I could be, encouraged me in places where I thought I was insufficient. She has been, she's been an encourager in my prayer life, in my Bible study. She's, two things that I can remember from back when we first got married. Her mom said, two things you need to do, because I grew up in Dallas, and so we're, taking the boy away from his mama. And two things her mom said: y'all need to go home until you have kids. Go home once a month to Dallas, and make sure he calls his mama every week. A lot of Sundays, that's my nap time if I can get it. And but she, every Sunday, if I hadn't picked up the phone already, she's like, hey, when are you going to call your mom? When are you going to call your mom? And so I called my mom every week. And until we had boys, up until about 8 months of pregnancy with twins, which she looked like 9 months at about 5 months. But, and she'll admit to that. I got pictures if you don't believe me. And she would, and we went every month to see my parents. I want to say we might have missed 1 month in 6 years. So, and she was the driving force behind that, because I could always come up with something else I wanted to do than pack up on, because it was leave on Friday after work and come back on Sunday. And those were our trips. But, so there's no place in my life she hasn't touched, and it's been for the better. So.
All right, let's switch from being a spouse to being a parent again. You have 2 boys, as we've established, Jed and Noah. They're both out of the house, metaphorically speaking. They're both in college.
Still paying for them.
Yeah, you're still paying for them, but you'll always pay for them, but not in that way. How have you handled the transition from being a parent of kids who are always at home, kids who live at the house, go to high school, etc., to being a parent of kids who are out of the home? What is that transition like, and how is that going for you?
Okay,
answer that one first, just for fun.
I asked her if I could tell this part, and she said okay. We're not real proud of ourselves for the first part, because we're very much our own couple. She and I are, but we're very invested in the boys too. Like I said, we were 6 years having them, and we were trying long before that. So, but we're very much invested in them, and so they go to school at Harding, and that's 40 minutes from our house. And so there was a caravan of 4 vehicles that day we took them their freshman year, because I don't know why we're taking so much stuff. The rooms aren't big enough to hold all this. But we have Sharon's Tahoe, Jed's Yukon, my Suburban, and Noah's F-150 crew cab, and the back of his truck is even full of stuff. I don't know where it all went. It hasn't all come back to my house, I know that. But anyway, that's probably a good thing. And then we came home that night, and you've already seen I'm a crybaby, so I'm crying the whole way there. We're driving, and we get back, and the very first night we go sit down, and Sharon always has to have at least one light on if we're watching TV or whatever in the living room. And we sat there in total darkness, and I turned the TV on and watched the movie, and she never said the first word about turning the light on. And so the first semester, it was so quiet. And if you ever got to meet Jed, I mean, he will crack you up. I believe it, because I've seen him do it with everyone he's ever met. He's a funny guy. And so he was kind of what would spark things in our house, and the laughter and everything. So it was kind of quiet. And Sharon, this is when I finally found out. By that time, we'd been married 23 years. And I'm just then finding out that I'm not the funniest guy in the house. Well, she told me, she said, no, you're no. So, but now, that took, let's see, their first semester, and then that was August, and then in December is when my mother passed away right after Christmas. And so that was a little bit of a tough year. But since then, especially when they came back home for the summer, and they'd had all this different kind of freedom at school, and they get back to our house, and there's like, hey, when are you gonna take out the trash? When are you gonna do the dishes? I'm not your maid, clean up after yourself. And there's been none of this at Harding. I need to talk to the people at Harding. But so after that, there comes a time where it's like, I'm okay if you take off for a little while. Right now, Noah's away for 5 weeks at a church camp in New York State as a counselor. Jed's about to haul off to Orlando for 5 months. And we're okay with that. We'd rather they were closer, but we're enjoying one another, and it makes it more fun when they come back for the few days, because we have the laughter and stuff again. And I'm not really expecting them to, take out the trash all the time and water sharing. I like when they come home because then I don't have to feed the animals and I don't have to water all the plants, because that's the job. That's a chore. But anyway, so it's hard at first, but it turns into a blessing.
Great.
What your boys obviously have had such a big impact on you, and you certainly have a good relationship with them. My grandfather used to say that he has learned so much more from his kids and his grandkids than he learned just on his own. Why do you think that is true, and what are some of those fundamental bits of advice for those kinds of parents that are looking to learn from their kids? Do you think that's true, that parents can learn from their kids?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. I learned a lot from the boys. I learned how to be persistent when you really want something and working one another. But yeah, that's a whole different story. I would agree with what your grandfather said, because sometimes you're so much in the thick of things that it's difficult to see. You're trying to make the best decisions. You're trying to do this the right way. And young parents, it ain't happening. You're not going to make the right decision every time. And you're going to look back and say, yeah, I probably could have done that differently. And that's fine. This is, like I told our parenting class at RNC, this is the first time I've ever been parents of 21-year-old twin boys. So whatever happens now, I can learn a little bit from the past, but there's things that I'm going to have to figure out. And if we make a mistake, because, if your kids are kids, sometimes they'll point out the parenting mistakes that you've made. And so then, that's when you say, I used to change your diapers. I taught you how to eat with a spoon, so, you got nothing. But, so some fundamental bits of advice for parents. I'm going to say it again, discipline your kids. And discipline them while they're young. They're not going to break. They're not fragile. Sharon was counseling with a young mother at church, and she already had one child and then had a set of twins after that. And this mama told her that her boys they're still too young, they're still too soft. And fragile was the word that she used. They're not going to break. I would say discipline them and I'm not pulling off the leather belt on a toddler, but I'm saying a hand spat and a hand spat every time until they understand that means no, because they're when they do these brilliant things, we say how smart they are. They can learn the same things with your discipline. And so I would say discipline at a very young age and be consistent with it, especially when you're tired, because there's going to be a lot of times when that happens. And I want to say, even in today's world, I would say, because if they learn they can get away with it in front of certain people or in certain places. But I'm not a child beater, but discipline your children and do it consistently.
I'm gonna go home and whoop my kids tonight.
I think you should, just because. No.
They're giving me bad look.
No, that's not what I said. I hope y'all heard that. But and then I would also say, let them know that you're proud of them. And I would say do that often. Let them know that you love them and that you're proud of them. We can go a lot and do a lot of things in life and just live life and forget to tell and to show our family that we love them and that we're proud of what they're doing. And I'm not talking about they have to make the best grades. I'm not talking about they have to be the best in whatever sport they like or whatever. It's, for our boys, it was always, I know you need to give your best. Whatever you're doing, and push them beyond what you think they can. Noah was a very shy young boy. And we just, right or wrong, maybe it was one of my parenting mistakes, but we pushed him because Jed was always out there. Jed didn't mind being out there in front of everybody. He didn't get embarrassed about anything. And we always pushed Noah to be out there too. And leading out front is not for everybody, but I would encourage you to push your kids beyond what you think they can do. it just so happens that it worked out with Noah, because he's just this week at that camp. He said, "Dad, I've lost track of the times I've been in front of the whole camp. I don't know how big this camp is, but and I've had to do these things by myself." And he said, "I'm thankful that y'all made me do that, because otherwise," he said, he probably wouldn't have even gone to the camp in the first place." But and I would say, spouses, love one another. I just can't emphasize that enough. Love God and love one another. They got to see that from you. They got to see that, because they see the love relationship you have with Christ, the love relationship you have with one another, and that so much helps them when they get to that point in their lives. I can't stress those things enough.
You had mentioned your two sons. They are very different. If you don't know Jed and Noah, they're introvert versus extrovert. But if you get to know Noah, and I know him pretty well myself, he has a very big personality, but he just doesn't show it in front of typically a big group of people. But they are very different. So I want to ask you, as a father of two very different kids. I have 3 kids. As you guys know, they're very different. They share some similarities, but they are 3 very different kids. Alex's kids, they're perfect. We don't talk about them. My kids, they're very, very distinct. They have very different personalities. So you have 2 very distinct kids. They're very different. How do you raise 2 very different kids and be fair, be equal, and feel like you've done the right job with both of them, though they're very different? Does that make sense?
Yes.
How do you do that?
I didn't. Sharon did.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Ask your wife.
Hand them over to your wife. Yeah. Remember, she's always right. Any questions, refer back to that.
Yeah.
The day the boys were born, I remember the doctors had left them in a warming tray for, I don't remember what purpose, but my boys just laying there, both just buck naked. This is part of me embarrassing them. They don't even know it. So, but they're both laying there buck naked, and they're head to foot. They're laying at opposite ends of the same tray, and Noah is just laying there, just looking around, and he's just taking in the whole world, just big old eyes. And Jed is just screaming like somebody's trying to kill him. He's kicking and punching and screaming, and Noah's just laying there like Jed's not even next to him. And that's pretty much a description of their personalities from day one. Now, people, even Sharon and I, will disagree on who they look like in the family. Everybody that meets them says, "Oh, this one looks like you," or "This one looks like her," and no 2 people agree. And their personalities are that way too. There's such a mixture of us. I would never have believed. I guess I expected this one to be a little Alan, this one to be a little Sharon, or stuff. I don't know what I expected as a dad, but there's such a wonderful mixture of the 2 of us, and I can see other parts of our family too. And so, the partiality and the playing the favorites. Now there's some points in Jed's personality where he's so much like Sharon, and points in Noah's personality where he's so much like me, that we could look at those things, but and I can just talk about us, but it hasn't been difficult, because the wonderful mixture that they both have, it's easy to love both of them. Noah is like I said, Jed is kind of Sharon's personality, but Sharon is a math whiz. But Noah is the math genius of the 2 of them. And Jed, he said, "What college major is there that doesn't require math? That's the one I want. I don't care what it pays. That's the job I want. But I don't have to do math ever again," because he and Sharon would just have some awful arguments at night during high school because of his math homework. Because, "Why don't you just get this?" And Noah's like, "Yeah, why don't you just get this?" I'm like, "I don't get it." But anyway, luckily I didn't have to do the homework. But it wasn't difficult. God blessed us with, like I said, such just a mixture of us and the 2 of them that it wasn't hard.
Let's go on to the bonus questions now. We've been giving each guest kind of a bonus question to talk about 3 or so verses that they try to live by, or their favorites, or ones that they have really identified with. What are your verses that really are true to your heart? Okay.
Is this the part where I give you the verses and you quote them for me?
Yeah, we're not going to do that. Just give us the verses.
Well, I'll just do, I told you I had 4, and I'll just do 3.
You can go 4 if you have 4.
Well, and one of them, Matthew's going to know 2 out of 3 of these because I used them. One was our theme for camp this week, this year, and one of them I used in the lesson I was forced to teach at camp, which is, I don't know if Matthew's ever told you, but that's the scariest audience you'll ever you'll preach in front of is camp, or me anyway. But so Luke 15, 4 through 7, it's the parable of lost sheep. Now Matthew has a version of that. I prefer Luke's version because of where it talks about when the shepherd finds a sheep, and he throws them over his shoulder and he's rejoicing. And he goes home and he finds all his friends and he brings them in and he tells all them, look what I found a sheep that was lost. It's coming from the background I told you I had for a lot of years in my life, that's a big deal to me because I was that sheep. And there's a lot of sheep like that out there that sometimes we might overlook. We buried one like that yesterday that you might not have picked him out from the crowd, but because if you got to know him, his personality, his nature, and everything, there's a lot of us out there like that we may not look like we're lost. The whole time, I didn't look like I was lost because I did everything I could on Sundays and Wednesdays to appear like I was the most found one out there. So be looking for the lost. Mark 16:7, and that's the parable of, not the parable, that's the story of Mary and Martha going to the tomb, and particularly verse 7, because the angel tells the 2 ladies, he says, go tell his disciples and Peter. And then the last part of that verse is my favorite part, is where he says, it will be the way, just as he told you. And that's where I got from when I was saying a while ago that if God tells you this, you can take it to the bank. Because Jesus said, this is how things are going to happen. And that's a pretty big deal, overcoming death, I think. So I can't do it, As my friend Travis points out, I can't. God says you can't make your hair grow, or change the color of it. Why do you think you need to worry about all these other things? I can't overcome death. Jesus said he was going to, and Jesus said this is how it would be, and it was. And I can put a lot of faith in what God tells me. If he tells me that I'm a valiant warrior, that I can go try that at least. I can go do that to the best of my ability. And then Lamentations 3, 19 through 25. This is my favorite passage. If I had to do all of them, this is my favorite one, and it's the one I struggle with the most in my life. It's a song of hope in the midst of a terrible situation that the Israelites and that Jerusalem is in. And but Jeremiah still says, I think about these things and I have hope. And when I told Sharon my list, she's nodding at their Lamentations. She says, you're terrible with that. And I said, yeah, I am. I struggle with that a lot. That's something else that she's always honest with me. And I hope that your spouse is always honest with you. They're not trying to fluff you up. But she's always honest with me. And I struggle with that. I want to be in the middle of a bad situation and be able to say, it is well with my soul. For a lot of years now, I told her that's my favorite song. And I struggle with that. I want to be that person who is watching the seas lash around them and everything, and they're calm in that boat. That's not always me. But that's what I'm trying to attain to. The fourth one, I know I was only allowed 3, but the last few chapters of Job, where Job's been talking and God finally says, I've had enough. Put on your big boy pants and we'll talk. And he starts going through. I love the part where God goes through and tells him, here's all the things I've created. Were you there when I laid the foundations of the earth? Can you tell me how long it takes for a deer to calf? I mean, he just goes on and on and on. And I think that's so awesome that God just spoke and all that happened. That's just awesome to me. So that's why that's number 4. So anyway, those are my verses.
Thank you, Alan. Hey, we want to ask, because we've been asking this too, just as an extra thing, and then we'll be done. Was there anything that we did not talk about, any subject or any that could have been a question or that could have been some material that we didn't cover that you wanted to say kind of as a final word before we wrap it up?
I do. And this is kind of parenting and kind of just life in general, but young children, parents, baptism is the biggest commitment you'll make in your life. That is what every other decision in your life is based off of, the commitment that you make to Christ. Everything else in your life is based off of that decision, because if I'm following Christ, then it makes a difference if I'm asked to do something in my job that I shouldn't, or if I'm approached by a friend at school to do something I shouldn't. Because I've made a commitment to Christ, I make a different decision than most people would. Even if it may be expedient, it may be get me ahead at work, or it may be get me in with the right crowd at school. Because I'm a follower of Christ, I base my decision on different things, on a higher call. Then your decision to marry. That is for life. That is for life. I've told people that I work with that I'm committed to my wife, and she's committed to me, and we're going to be married forever. You know, save death, whenever death happens. And they'll look at me and say, "You can't know that." I said, "Yes, I can." Because of the commitments I've made, because I decided to follow Christ. It helps a lot. And you maybe have to be the start of that chain. But it helps a lot to have grandparents who were married 50 years. It helps to have parents that were married 50 years. My parents and Sharon's parents celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary within a month of each other. And it helps to have that. That's a good foundation. You see that, because I've seen my parents have some knockdown drag-outs. My mom and dad loved each other, though, and they stuck it out. Life is not easy. So that's why all these things we talk about, all these, you know, should I marry a non-Christian, and agreeing on discipline and finances and those things, those are important, because life is hard enough. If you agree on all those things, life is still going to come at you. So I want to encourage you to consider that your baptism is the biggest decision you'll ever make, and that marriage is for life. One other thing, and this is just, do we have time for a short soap? Oh, we're after 6. I apologize. They told me to talk. They told me not just to give one word answers, so that's why I'm doing this. But I'll give you this, and I'll be done. Real short soapbox, but in an age of social media, it can do so many good things. And this is just coming from, this is not even from Sharon. She didn't tell me not to say it, so. I see a lot of times when people are getting engaged that we say, this is the love of my life, this person fills me, this person makes me whole, those things. But I never hear that said about when we put the Lord on in baptism. And I'm not trying to harp on the wedding part of it, but I want you to consider the Christ part of it. Because Scripture tells us that God makes us whole. In the Lamentations, the Lord is my portion. He's all I need. That's why I was saying before, when we talk about premarital counseling, we really ought to focus on God, because if we don't, then we can be fooled into believing that my wife, that Sharon is enough for me. And we both know that that's not the case. That can't be the case, because I'm going to disappoint her and she's going to disappoint me. So make God your portion. Make God the love of your life. And then when you find that person on the earth who needs to be the person to stand beside you, then they will be what they are supposed to be, and they'll be in their proper position. Thank you, Alan.
Alan, thank you so much. You really shared your heart with us tonight, and we appreciate it very, very much. What a great opportunity it's been for all of us to think about what we can do better as parents and as husbands and wives, and just being overall better family. The key thing that I just keep seeing being brought up is our focus on God. That's the key thing on our relationships, and I just appreciate you so much bringing that to our attention. We need that. We want to restore the family. Family here at North Heights needs to be restored. The family all over our community and all over our world needs to be restored. And so we're thankful that you're able to be here tonight to talk to us about that.
Thank you very much.